Welcome back to part 2 of ISB's Junior Parent Night, the University and Application Research Process. So one of the questions sometimes that parents and students might have is, where do ISB students matriculate after they graduate? This information you see here is based on the class of 2014. As you can see, 69% of the graduating class went to university in the United States, 12% to Europe and the UK, followed by Canada, Thailand, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and then some other countries. Sometimes Korea isn't fully represented here because students are applying after they've graduated, and we haven't quite been able to track down all of that information. Again, every year here might look a little bit different, but the overall trends from year to year are similar. One thing that we are seeing is that more ISB students are applying to multiple countries worldwide, so that might not be reflected here in these numbers either. Many universities are going to require various standardized tests as part of the admission process. So that's why right now we're really focusing on the fact that students need to do their research for university to see what is required. IB predicted grades are often required by most institutions. While some institutions in the United States might not rely heavily on these, they still might want to see them as part of the process. Institutions like NYU, for example, have now become test optional or test flexible, which means maybe instead of SAT scores, a student might present their IB predicted grades. Some universities might want the SAT. It's safe to assume that while there are a number of universities in the U.S. that don't require the SAT or ACT, it would be good to have that just in case, and then you can decide later if you want to submit that. The ACT right now has an optional writing section. Many universities, if you take the ACT with writing, they might waive SAT subject tests if those are required. Typically, more competitive institutions will want SAT subject tests, and usually students can choose which subject test they want to take based on where they feel most confident. If a student's native language is not English, we highly recommend they take the TOEFL or the IELTS by the end of grade 11. If a student is applying to the UK and requires a student visa, the UK will now only accept the IELTS exam. Some programs in the UK will also require a special exam depending on what you want to apply for. So if you want to apply to law, you'll need the LNAT, or if you want to apply to medicine, you might need the BMAT or the UK CAT. To register for those, you can go to the British Council here in Bangkok, and in order to see what's required for each university, you can go to the university website, or for example in the UK, you can go to UCAS. Some of our students also have to sit national exams depending on where they're going. So maybe that's Japan or India. It just depends, but students really need to begin investigating those requirements now so that they can plan ahead. If a student is applying to Canada, let's say, and maybe does not have the full IB diploma, they might need to submit the SAT scores along with their high school transcript. But they really need to do that research now. Admission requirements, again, are going to vary from institution to institution. So a few questions for students and parents to think about. Does the student know the admission requirements and then the procedures for the country or the university to which they're applying? Some universities are qualifications only in terms of admission. So do they have the IB scores? Obviously that would probably be the UK, Australia. Or other universities have a holistic admission. So not only do they look at the academic profile of grades and standardized test scores, but they also want to know about the student voice. So that's holistic admissions. Student voice is demonstrated through teacher recommendations, counselor evaluations, student essays, and so on. If you're applying to the UK, are you familiar with the UCAS system and the necessary qualifications? What admission tests do you need? Some of those that we referred to just a moment ago. In Australia, do the universities that the student is applying to require the IB diploma? If the student doesn't have the diploma, maybe they need a bridge year if they're an Australian citizen, or maybe if they're an international student, they might require a foundation year. If students are applying to universities in Thailand, Japan, or Korea, are they looking at English language programs, or are they looking at programs that are taught in the native language? Those are quite different also from each course. So for example, here in Thailand, there isn't a main admissions system. Students have to research each program or major that they're applying to, and those application requirements are going to differ. So earlier when we were looking at the scattergrams, we were referencing this idea of reach, target, and safety. Okay, so this is solely referring to chances of admission. Is the university, is it a safe bet that the student most likely will be accepted based on the student's academic profile? Is the institution a target institution? So saying, okay, it's not a definite that the student's going to be accepted. And by the way, no admissions decision is definite that a student's going to be accepted. But maybe it's a little more likely given the academic profile. And then, is that institution going to be a reach? And we're going to look at that in just a minute. Many of you might have read or heard of Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath. It's here in the library. We encourage you to take a look at it if you have a son or daughter going through this process. But really the question is it best for your student to be a big fish in a small pond? So maybe have more access to resources and professors or lab equipment? Or is it maybe are they used to being in this small school environment like ISB, and maybe they just want to go to a large institution and be one of many, many students? So this is something that we really think that students need to think about before they apply to university. So looking at some of that data when talking about reach, target, and safety. So here are some of the more competitive universities worldwide that ISB students have applied to. Okay, so we've got a couple of U.S. institutions with Chicago, Duke. Then we've also got Korea University, Oxford, and Cambridge. These are the number of ISB students who have applied from 2009 to 2013. This is how many have been admitted. Of those students who have been admitted, you can see whether or not they were the top 10 student, 10% at ISB. Okay, so really, if the chances of acceptance to these institutions, if a student isn't in the top 10%, isn't likely. That's going to be a reach, and we feel that students should have a balanced list of institutions. The data really can't be argued with. It explains the process and what that's like. So the totals for these schools, 346 applications, 55 of those applications were accepted, and 51 of those students were in the top 10%. So overall to those institutions, only 15.9% of ISB students were selected to the most, or accepted to the most selective universities in the world. So really, in conclusion, if your conclusion is that your son or daughter should apply to the University of Chicago, you might have missed the point. Ask the question, where is your son or daughter going to thrive in all of those different ways that we mentioned earlier? Maybe it's better to aim for one of those institutions for graduate school after they have a little bit of more experience at the undergraduate level. Not every ISB student goes off directly to university when they graduate from ISB. Some students might have a gap year. Some students might have military service requirement. Or some of our students who attend Australian universities in the first semester, which begins January, February after graduation, they have some time off. So we really want to acknowledge those students, that not everyone goes directly to university. For any of those students, our recommendation is to have a plan. Have a goal of that time where you're not in school. Are you going to do some service work? Are you going to maybe explore something further that you weren't able to do during the regular school year? We encourage you to keep it simple. Some universities might want to know, what are you doing during that time? And also make sure that your plan is a flexible one. So looking forward as we begin to wind down the timeline for the next few months. Right now for junior year, we're looking at the junior conference, which will be scheduled soon. Students should be conducting a lot of research, developing a long list of universities, and thinking about visits. We really encourage university visits if they're at all possible. Evaluate universities based on their visits and their research and begin to narrow down their list. Students should be taking standardized tests now. Think about something worthy to do in the summer, and again, that looks different for everyone. And then at the beginning of grade 12, we'll ask students to bring their short list of universities to review and finalize with their counselor. Earlier, I mentioned the junior packet that needs to be completed. That is now past due. Students need to see one of the secretaries in the counseling office to schedule the junior conference. Check the university visits and meet with the representatives. Please, please, please meet with those university representatives who travel all this way. We would like to have clear, healthy, and consistent communication with counselors, with the parent, with the student. And there will be another junior seminar for students thinking about their summer plans, and that will happen in May. The junior conference, some of you have already experienced that. Again, it's a 1-hour meeting where we review the academic record of the student. We talk about their course selection for grade 12 and graduation requirements. What are the university interests? We go through Naviance and we discuss universities that they've listed on their list. We talk about some of those ISB application policies and agreements, and then the student creates a to-do list for their university research. Usually students and parents find this incredibly valuable. Counselors learn even more about a student to help them in the process. So we feel that this is a really important part of the ISB program. In closing, students should be scheduling their junior conferences now. Building a relationship with their counselor, the more we know, the better we can help them. We encourage students to be really thoughtful and careful about their virtual life. Do they have an appropriate email address that universities will see? What kind of message do they want to send to universities with their life online? Universities are beginning to research this information. Students should be attending the university labs held on Monday afternoons in room 203. They should be speaking with all of the universities that come to ISB and having their list of colleges updated. And again, really, we encourage at minimum 10 hours of research for every university. So that means not just talking to family, friends, and alumni, but also researching the website, looking at the requirements. Unigo in the United States, UNIGO, a great resource for hearing from current students. What do they think of that institution? So again, just a lovely photo of our department. We're really here to help you through this process. Again, it looks different for everyone. We have some wonderful assistants in our office as well. Kun Mai, Kun Namwan, and Kun Wa. Appointments should be scheduled through Kun Mai and Kun Wa. Kun Namwan is the wonderful person who will be sending off documents for students next year. She's our school registrar. So in closing, we really want to encourage students and parents to be open to all possibilities. This really is a journey. It's just as much about the ride as it is the final destination. And again, counselors are here to help. So if you have questions, please let us know, and we look forward to seeing you in the junior conference.